This week on The Record, the transfer of power. President Biden delivers a farewell address. President-elect Trump prepares to re-enter the Oval Office. What the new government means for immigration, deportation, and how local police could play a role in it all. It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Mike Kehoe's first actions as Missouri's new governor tapped state and local police to help enforce federal immigration law, aligning Missouri police with the incoming president's plan to ramp up federal deportation.
Missouri State Highway Patrol, this is a 287G issue, will designate specific officers to undergo training in federal immigration enforcement in order to assist federal law enforcement with immigration enforcement and further secure Missouri. Next, we will have illegal immigrant data collection. Requires immigration status to be collected for those charged with committing crimes within the state of Missouri.
You might expect reporters had questions about what that might look like on the ground. Attorney General Andrew Bailey stayed back to explain if police would run immigration status checks on people suspected of crimes or just those convicted.
That's people who are being investigated for criminal behavior. The state of Missouri will begin tracking their immigration status as well. And the state of Missouri, under Governor Kehoe's leadership and executive order, will begin training our state law enforcement officers to assist with immigration enforcement when called upon by President Trump's administration to help.
Where do they go?
Depends on where the federal government conducts that training. It can be here, it can be in other locations.
We don't have any detention centers in Missouri for ICE.
No, that's not true. There are local jails that serve as detention facilities based on contract with the federal government.
Will police be checking people if they pull them over for a speeding ticket or at a stoplight on the roads? Is that going to be part of this?
Yeah, I think a comprehensive approach to ensuring that we're capturing the data point of the immigration status of individuals that are committing criminal offenses in the state of Missouri is altogether appropriate and is, again, the policy objective in the executive order. And folks,
including traffic misdemeanors?
You know, again, it's criminal offenses, so there are certain ordinance offenses that don't rise to the level of criminal offenses, but for violations of the criminal code, yes.
And joining us now is St. Louis Alderwoman Daniela Velasquez. Good to have you with us. You previously worked with the ACLU and are familiar with some of these issues. I wonder how much assurance that provides you that the Attorney General says police would only be going after people suspected of crimes and not of just traffic ordinances.
It doesn't provide me much assurance at all. Just given Attorney General Bailey's history and not really seeming to care about civil liberties or rights much at all, but certainly the thought of pulling people over and checking for are they going to check immigration status based on last name, what they might look like, how are they going to determine that? Those are questions I would have. It seems to me, just on a glance and even hearing his comments, that it seems a lot like profiling to me.
The stated goal at the outset, even from President Trump, he had started talking on the campaign trail about mass deportations, broadly speaking, and then narrowed it to violent criminals only, and that's the language we're hearing right now. But there are a lot of things that are illegal in Missouri, and those laws can change quite quickly. I don't know if you have any concerns about any particular law being used as sort of pretext to round people up. How are folks in the immigrant community right now preparing for the unknown?
Well, I think this is just causing more fear and division, and that is my concern, and I think that continues to be the community's concern. Most immigrants here do not commit crimes. Most do not commit violent crimes. There's data that shows that. Even the Special Committee on Illegal Immigrant Crimes, much to their dismay, found that in their statewide tour of trying to discover some data that said otherwise.
One other thing that you raised to the public's attention recently was this random arson in Puerto Rico, and for a while we did not know, well, we had suspicions about who it was. It seemed that it linked back to a woman from St. Louis area. But now we know that the feds are indicting a 36-year-old woman, Danielle Bertathy, from the St. Louis area here with arson, and if convicted, she faces a mandatory minimum of at least 5 years behind bars. I know you're well connected in the Puerto Rico community, and this was a matter of much discussion. What was the general reaction when they saw this incident, a woman taking a gas can? The video shows the aftermath. What was the reaction to how all this transpired?
I mean, outrage. I mean, so I'm Puerto Rican. I think a lot of people in my ward at least know that by now. And just as being Puerto Rican and being part of the diaspora, or we call ourselves diasporicans, you know, I saw it on social media. I think there's a lot happening on the island right now, particularly with gentrification. Rent has gone up 700% on the island since Hurricane Maria. So the idea of a tourist with a sense of entitlement that burned down a couple of 4 businesses and destroying livelihoods during what the world considers the longest Christmas season. It goes for 45 days in Puerto Rico. Is you know, it's an outrage to the people from there. So it caused concern, and the fact that there was an immediate arrest. Obviously, the internet did what it did, and they wanted justice, as I did too. And I'm glad to see this arrest.
Do you have any sense of what took so long? The incident occurred 2 weeks before the indictment.
I don't. I wasn't ever officially briefed by anybody. I did talk to the mayor in Cabo Rojo and the vice mayor, and there was just a lot of communication between their municipal government and me and the police, but there wasn't really a sense of why. And I think that was part of the outrage too. I mean, they're just, from what I hear from Puerto Ricans on the island and even the diaspora, there's this concern that there's a double standard in how law enforcement treats tourists, particularly Americans from the mainland or on the island.
Reluctant to pursue charges?
Yes, and so.
Because?
Well, one, I think the fear of stopping tourism, but also that, you know, that they don't want to, that they don't want to stop tourism, or they don't want to detract any visitors. But
But you don't have any reason to suspect that that was a factor here, or?
No, I don't know. I mean, I don't officially know because I wasn't briefed, but just based on the conversations that I've had with fellow Puerto Ricans around the country, I mean, that was a fear because there was an incident where a protester was arrested shortly after the governor's inauguration, and there was conversation about that. And there was an official statement from the government on the island about that, but there was never an official statement from the government about this arrest.
At City Hall in St. Louis, you and all 13 of your colleagues voted recently in unanimous fashion to authorize or bring about this new city ID card for people, including people who may not have proper documentation or may not even be citizens of the United States or with legal status as immigrants here, but just maybe completely undocumented. What's the benefit there?
Well, the benefit is actually an economic and community-wide one. You need a photo ID so one, let me preface that there's been a lot of misinformation. You cannot use this ID to vote. It does not confer any status of citizenship, any of that. You cannot use it to buy age-restricted products.
You can't buy a beer with it.
You can't buy a beer with it, or cannabis, or any of that.
Or a gun.
Or a gun. But what you can use it, and what you actually need a photo ID to cash a check. Interestingly enough, you need a photo ID to go to a food pantry. You need a photo ID to open a bank account. So we found that a lot of people aren't able to have an ID, aren't able to do basic things.
To get around the city and live, and
yes.
To maybe to fill out a rent application or to live somewhere. I want to ask you about city services, because this is something that a lot of aldermen pay very close attention to. How do you assess? Are you satisfied with the way the city has handled the ice and snow in recent weeks?
Well, I think we could do better, and I think that's pretty obvious. I mean, why it's amusing to have stories about ice skating rinks in the ward, which I think Public Radio actually ran one about that. It's also really dangerous, and I've received some really heartbreaking emails of people just pleading with me and with the city to just clear the streets of ice because their elderly neighbors can't get out, or they can't pick up their kids at school. So I think, I hope we do better next time.
Thick layers of ice have coated city streets for nearly 2 weeks, and only some relenting weather over the weekend to kind of thaw some of that. And now we're seeing the streets department director, Bethany Williams, say, well, maybe a city worker gave me inaccurate information. I don't know if there was dishonest intent there or not, but she's suggesting that somebody that works for her misled her and that she was just caught off guard. How could that happen? Is there not better accounting for work that's completed in the city government?
Well, I don't work in the streets department. What I can tell you is that between earlier in the week when I asked the administration if they could just provide some communication because I was being inundated with questions, rightly so, from my constituents. I was copied on lots of emails that Director Williams was also copied on, just ranging from the situations I told you. So those emails happened between now and that statement. So I
hear you, and I wish we had more time. I would love to hear about this plan you have for a city manager, not to replace a mayor, but to take some of the appointment power away. Just real quickly, how is the mayor's office responding to this idea of yours?
Well, I was at a meeting last night, and Mayor Jones says it creates more bureaucracy. I obviously disagree, since I filed the bill. I think that we need a city manager. I think that, the Post-Dispatch ran a great editorial with references from Kansas City about how they researched snowplows recently, and that's why they were able to do a really good job with this snowstorm. But I think that we need to modernize our government, and this has been a method that has worked in many cities, like Kansas City, Cincinnati, Dallas, San Antonio, even Springfield has a city manager. And these are places that are growing and thriving, and I think it's something that our city should consider.
We'll have to have you back soon to hear more about it. Alderwoman Daniela Velazquez, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We're back in a moment. Before Inauguration Day, a number of President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet picks faced questions in the Senate confirmation hearings. Illinois Senator Dick Durbin said Trump's Attorney General pick, Pam Bondi, was bipartisan in Florida as AG there, but he also offered a word of concern for Trump's relationship with Attorney Generals past.
The testimony today, particularly from people of the opposite political party in Florida, is a testimony to the fact that she's been bipartisan and very effective as Attorney General. I will concede that point. When she talks about the things she achieved, I'm impressed. I should be. But the question is, when Donald Trump knocks on her door as Attorney General, and he will, if you question that, ask Jeff Sessions or ask Bill Barr, he will knock on her door and ask her to do something that's going to be a challenge ethically or morally. It's just his nature. He views that office as an office he personally controls. He doesn't. The American people and the Constitution control that office, and we have to resolve whether or not Ms. Bondi is a person to be the next Attorney General. Our first minority witness is Lisa Gilbert, co-president of Public Citizen, a nonprofit organization with more than 500,000 members. The organization has an extensive record of investigating conflicts of interest in public corruption, and Ms. Gilbert will speak to the dangers of confirming someone with corporate interest as Attorney General.
Pick facing a lot of scrutiny, Secretary of Defense nominee Pete Hegseth, Illinois Senator and Iraq War veteran Tammy Duckworth went to the Senate floor to call Hegseth unqualified.
During his time in uniform, Pete Hegseth never commanded a unit with more than 200 people. Meanwhile, on the civilian side, both organizations that he led went into debt. In fact, he so badly mismanaged one of them that they had to bring in a forensic accountant to clean up the mess that he had made. That's it. Those are his only supposed qualifications to head up one of the most complex, important organizations in the world.
Compare that grilling to this confirmation hearing of Senator and Secretary of State nominee Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Duckworth sharing a heartwarming story, an exchange she had with him when she first joined the Senate.
When I first got to the Senate and I was in my first year and you just run for president, and I didn't think you would know who I was pregnant with my daughter and trying to change Senate rules so that I could bring her onto the floor so I could do my job and vote, because I can't come through the normal back door to vote because there's stairs there and it's not accessible for wheelchairs. And I remember in the middle of that battle, rolling through the Senate floor to vote, and I heard, "Tammy Duckworth," from across the Senate chambers, and you came running down from the top back of the Senate chambers to tell me, "I'm with you, I will support you, you have the right to vote, and I will support you being able to bring your daughter, your child onto the floor when she's born." And I want to thank you for that kindness, because you did speak to your leadership about it. And it was a moment of true bipartisanship, but also as parents. And as someone who was new to the Senate, I was extremely grateful to you for that kindness.
I think what I exactly said is, what's the big deal? This place is already full of babies.
Stay tuned to the Senate. A lot more confirmation hearings later this week. We're back in a moment. Welcome back. As the nation prepares for the inauguration of Donald Trump and his return to the White House, many people are also watching what that inauguration and the incoming administration means for them. One of those areas most impacted immigration and enforcement at the local, state, and federal levels. Joining us now is Illinois State Senator Terry Bryant. Good to have you back with us.
Good to be here. I always love being on your show.
In Missouri, the incoming governor is deputizing local and state law enforcement to assist in the enforcement of federal immigration law. What do you expect to see in Illinois?
Well, and as long as we have the Trust Act, I would anticipate that law enforcement is going to have a very difficult time cooperating with ICE without violating Illinois state law. So that's why last year I filed a bill to repeal the Trust Act. It goes so deep that, you know, I'm retired from the Department of Corrections. The Department of Corrections cannot even notify ICE if they have a known illegal immigrant who's going to be paroling or maxing out and leaving an Illinois prison. So they're prohibited from notifying ICE.
At the date of the inauguration for the House and Senate, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker said this. He said that people who are here illegally, who have committed a violent crime while they're here, should be deported.
That's new for him. That's a new statement that he's making. He hasn't always said that. And I suspect they've done some polling and found out that the vast majority of Illinoisans and the vast majority of Americans believe that that should happen, as does President Trump. Those felons that are here who violated our laws beyond just being here illegally, where they have committed felonies, they've got to go. And that poll's very high. So I think Pritzker, who trusts polls, has seen that that's the case.
There are people who were either brought here as kids, who maybe have a speeding ticket or something, and then there are people who have moved here illegally. They, you know, maybe as adults, and they've been here for 20 or 30 years, raising kids, having adjoining families. How do you hope to see a Republican administration treat people in this predicament?
Well, the first thing we have to do is fix it federally. The state of Illinois can't fix what is a federal immigration problem.
Sure, I understand, but,
yeah.
but
and
you're
I've
a
always been
Republican.
I've been a supporter of some kind of pathway to citizenship, but that pathway to citizenship would have to be leaving and coming back again. For those that you're talking about, which are usually referenced as dreamers, they may have been brought here. They may never have don't even have any memory of living in another country, don't even speak the language of whatever that country was. We're smart people. We can find a way to have them register in a way. I mean, there's all kinds of things that have been thrown out there.
But the fix at Congress, at the congressional level, would have to speed up the line, because there are people that have been here waiting 10 years, 15 years just to get a green card.
There are people who are here from India and Pakistan who might be architects or doctors who may not get their green card in their lifetime. So, you know, they're talking, those folks that I've talked to said that they're going to wait 70 to 80 years before they would even be eligible for a green card. And that's because we have quotas right now. So you have individuals who are coming who have totally ignored whatever our quotas are and come in slamming down the back door when you have people who came in through the front door trying to do it right, and they may never get a green card.
Do you see value, economic, social, or otherwise, in immigrants who are here, even if they don't have the proper papers? Do you see value in their presence here?
No, I think we are a people of law. So you have to follow the laws as they're written. I do think that there are laws that we can change that would allow them to become citizens in time. But keeping someone here whose first act was to violate our laws is not the right way to do it.
Well, you're assuming intent in arriving here. I think, I'll tell you a story. I was with a group of nuns, church ladies, who were attending an immigrant advocacy group this week at a former school, the International Institute in St. Louis, and they advocate for people who are in this position. And they point to the fact that, look, many of these folks pay into Social Security with no promise that they'll ever see that check on the other side of retirement. They pay their sales taxes, they pay all kinds of taxes. They're here, they're part of the economy, they're spending money, which is creating economic activity. And they're also helping, these advocates are plugging many of these people into food benefits in some cases. You've got a plan in Illinois, you're highlighting the cost of some of these benefits.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're looking at a cost for fiscal year 25, that is nearly $1 billion. And the majority of that cost goes to Medicaid for illegal immigrants, asylum seekers, whatever the individual who's talking about it wants to call that other individual, where citizens of Illinois have what's called a managed care system. So they have to pay a spend down. They've got to they got to have pre-approval for where they're going to go to which doctor and what hospital. But those who are illegal immigrants in a certain age frame, they're fee for service. So they don't have to be pre-approved. They don't have a spend down. There's not even means testing in many cases. So that is not right for the people of Illinois.
The total dollar amount there
right now is well over $880 million, so nearly $1 billion.
Health care for people who are
part of it is health care. Part of it is welcoming centers, which are benefits for only illegal immigrants.
Those were more one-time costs, if I'm not mistaken, in constructing some of those welcoming centers. But let's set aside
no, they're not one-time costs. They're one time per year. So I was elected in 2015. That was $35,000 a year. We are now up to $115 million going to welcome centers.
And I believe a lot of that funding comes from the federal government through the state of Illinois to...
Some of that was CURES money, but we also have millions and millions of dollars of GRF money, so General Revenue Fund.
Yeah, that's just tax dollars from
Correct.
Illinois. I want to ask you about the healthcare piece. You said $800 million. I think you're suggesting that the number for healthcare is somewhat lower than that, but in that $800 million is a lot of healthcare money. What would be the cost, do you think, the alternative cost, if that healthcare was not provided? The cost of the healthcare system, if you don't treat somebody, the problem doesn't go away, right?
Well, that's true, but that's assuming that the person is not being deported. Right? So what our conversation is whether or not that person is legally here. So would we have to treat them while they're here? Yes, possibly. But in Illinois, the situation that we have is it's a sanctuary state, and Governor Pritzker has rolled out the red carpet for them. So even if someone needs a kidney transplant, they can come to Illinois and get a kidney transplant, and they might be put ahead of someone who is a U.S. citizen or an Illinois citizen over a citizen who is here. Those are the things that I'm saying are not right. I'm not saying that we shouldn't help people. I'm saying that if they're here illegally, we need to find the means to get them appropriately through the front door of immigration rather than coming through the back door.
Do I understand your proposal correctly, that it would deny all health insurance to people in Illinois that do not have legal citizenship? Or immigration status.
Yeah, if they don't have a legal immigration status, I mean, you go to a hospital in Illinois, yes, you're going to be treated, right? But at the same time, that person, if it's identified that that person is here illegally, then deportation process should begin.
You think the hospital should report them?
I think anybody who knows that someone is here illegally should be reporting them.
I'm trying to see, I'm looking for consistency in the positions here, because even President Trump has more recently softened some of his campaign rhetoric to say we're really going after the criminals, the violent criminals.
He says that's where we're starting.
So you expect it will go beyond that?
Well, I think it's going to take us decades.
I should have mentioned at the start of this, you plan to be at the inauguration.
I do, yeah, I do. In fact, I'm leaving tomorrow morning. Thursday morning.
Right.
So it will take us decades to sort all of this out, because of the number of people that we've allowed to cross the border, whether it's the southern border or the northern border, because let's face it, they're coming across the northern border as well. And the last report that I read showed that the folks on the terrorist watch list that have been caught, I believe, came across the northern border, the majority. So regardless of that, I'm saying that we have to start somewhere. So let's start with the low-hanging fruit, and low-hanging fruit are those that have committed felonies.
Neither of them are here right now, but both Governor Pritzker and Senator Dick Durbin, two prominent Democrats in Illinois, have acknowledged that in the last year or two, some of the benefits, healthcare and otherwise, that were set up for people who are here illegally, the cost ballooned to be a burden too great. And they both publicly acknowledged we've got to pare that back. In their own differing ways, they've suggested as much. So perhaps there's some pathway to common ground there. But while you're here, I want to get your input on another idea. You're familiar with the Fight for 51, this Southern Illinois secessionist movement that wants to break up with the state. It's kind of an before we get into where all this is heading, for any of our viewers that may know, there are some Indiana Republicans rather, that have said, hey, we'll take you. And there can be kind of like a rearrangement of the states here. Let's put this in its proper perspective first. How likely is any of this to ever happen?
I don't think it may happen in Indiana. They may actually pass their resolution, and they might actually get that commission put together with 4
saber-rattling with Governor Pritzker? Was it just...
I think so. I mean, I believe that the commission would consist of 4 Indiana legislators and 4 Illinois legislators.
To look at the issue.
Yes, appointed by the governor. I don't see Governor Pritzker appointing 4 Illinois legislators to allow part of Illinois to secede from Illinois, nor do I want to piecemeal or break up the state of Illinois. I want to fix the problems here. I don't want to break off pieces of Illinois.
Breakup is an interesting term because it would be a breakup, and I'm not sure it's a good deal for Southern Illinois to. So,
well, Southern Illinois probably would prefer to go to Kentucky or Missouri. Northern Illinois certainly would prefer to.
We're going to handle that real quick.
Sorry. Okay.
You just never know what you might get.
I'm so sorry. Northern Illinois has talked about going to Indiana. Now, my birth certificate says that I was born in Indiana, right? So I don't know which, and my dad's family comes from Kentucky. So I understand the frustration of Illinoisans all over the state who don't like the policies of Illinois.
The last time a United State, splintered off and went its own way was in 1863. When Abraham Lincoln himself was in the White House. It was West Virginia breaking off from Virginia during the Civil War. And now we have the land of Lincoln, a number of rabble-rousers, if I can call them that, trying to say we're going to split off part of the state here. The problem would become, say this were like a marriage and there was a divorce, it would be it's not like you break up and get this great payment, this lump sum. You'd actually be stuck without the place, the economic engine of the state that's been paying into it. So
that's kind of what I tell people is I said, you make sure that you understand the economics of what you're pushing for. Because for every $1 that Southern Illinois sends to Springfield, we get about $3 back for schools. So for each $1 for schools.
Public education, higher education.
Whichever, yeah. And so
Both,
if the people who should be angry about what happens are the suburbs of Chicago. For every $1 they send to Springfield for their schools, they get about 30 cents back, give or take, right? So I would say the frustration level in any place south of I-80 is very high, and it isn't that I don't think they really want to separate from any parts of Illinois, break those parts off, but they do want to have a louder voice. I represent all or parts of 14 counties. Between Senator Fowler and I, we have 28 of 102 counties, and we often feel like we're not heard.
Fair to say, so I think you just answered my question. Is it fair to say that a vast segment of Central and Southern Illinois feels underrepresented in Springfield?
I would say so. You have between myself, Plummer, Fowler, and Chapin Rose, we represent about 52 of the 102 counties.
Sparsely populated.
Four senators.
Rural counties.
4 out of 59 represent half of the counties in the state.
But we apportion votes by people.
By population.
And so how do you change that? And when I say change that, I mean how do you give those people in those scattered counties the sense that, hey, we're getting something out of this being in Illinois?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to have a governor who listens to the entire state. I don't find that Governor Pritzker listens to the entire state. He does come down and he makes some stops and he cuts some ribbons and he makes a show of listening to Southern Illinois.
On a factual basis, he's been in Southern Illinois a heck of a lot
He's there
more than
a lot.
Pat Quinn did, than Rob Blagojevich did.
No question about that. More than Rauner was there. He's been there quite a bit. But when you start looking at how, let's say, DCEO, so that's the organization that kind of doles out the money for economic growth and so forth. You might find, I'm going to pick some numbers out, so these are not going to be exact, but you may find 300 projects approved for the Chicago area and 1 approved for the Carbondale area. So when you start looking at those, I'll give you a perfect example. There was a grant. I want some geographic grant money. So I want a geographic component when you're talking about handing out grants. So there was one for blind seniors a few years ago. 150 in Marion, 150 blind seniors in Carbondale, so Jackson and Williamson County, 400 in St. Clair. They decided to take all the grant money and send it all to St. Clair County. So 700, and they're looking at it and saying, well, we have enough to do 700 people, we're going to do them in St. Clair. I said, well, how are our people supposed to get there? They said, public transportation. Great, we don't have public transportation. If you do, you have to go by county, and you have to make your reservation 24 hours in advance. So a blind senior has to get to St. Clair County from Alexander County. That's practically a 2.5-hour ride through multiple counties, and you got to make those plans 24 hours ahead. That's just an example.
I'm hearing that you have a long list of things that you'd like to find funding for, but we're going to have to leave it here for now.
Yeah,
But,
I'm just asking for a geographic component to the grants.
I hear you. And that would be a part of the puzzle in Southern Illinois, feeling like they were a part of the bigger pie.
I think so.
State Senator Terry Bryant, safe travels to Washington, D.C., and we hope to see you back again on the other side of it.
Thank you. I'll be back to give you a full report.
We're back in a moment. Interviews are one of my favorite parts of this job. You can learn so much just watching how a person responds, what parts of an answer they dodge or deflect, what questions might irritate them or open them up. But in all of my interviews, I've learned there's one time in a politician's career when you can ignore all of those subtle tells or slight giveaways, and you can just listen to them at face value. Not on the campaign trail, not in an inaugural address or in a heated floor debate. No, that's when their ambition torques them into overdrive and they reach to try and persuade you of something. No, I found that the most valuable, straightforward interviews I've ever done are at the end, when it's all over. At the end of a politician's career, almost like someone's last words. They've got nothing left to sell, no arms left to twist, just bearing witness to what they've seen over the course of their career. That's why President Joe Biden's farewell address stuck with me. So let's check the record.
Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy.
Now look, maybe you didn't vote for Joe Biden, maybe you didn't particularly like his time in office, but you have to acknowledge he's one of only a few men to hold that job, sit at that resolute desk, and see with the eyes of the entire American intelligence apparatus. And these aren't the words of sour grapes. He didn't lose the election, and his vice president raised far more money than the victor. He's talking about oligarchy. Still, he warned about the corrosive influence that wealth can have on power, as he borrowed from President Eisenhower's warnings of a looming military-industrial complex decades ago, and Biden said the danger today is in a tech-industrial complex.
Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power.
Biden called on Congress and the courts and the presidency and the press to all step up and confront the challenge of confusion in the information ecosystem. And look, to our viewers and news consumers who are familiar with the push to regulate or censor big tech, you might understand why a tech mogul would ingratiate themselves to an incoming president. See, it's not all that different from the print publishers in the 18th and 19th centuries. The earliest newspapers in America were political campaigns. And the social media companies today, they're not much different from the early broadcasters in the 20th century. But back then, Congress took action in several ways to promote the public interest. In the 1930s, we founded the Federal Communications Commission to regulate the airwaves. Our government recognized that information was critical to a healthy society, and too much clutter on those airwaves might cause interference or chaos. The FCC licensed radio and TV stations, but our end of the deal as broadcasters was to promote localism. Look out for our neighbors. Notify the public of matters of great importance to them and alert them to severe weather. Now, you can reach more people on TikTok than you can on TV. And the internet infrastructure underneath it all, actual cables and wires buried under the oceans and computers talking to satellites flying in orbit. The FCC regulates internet speeds and delivery there, but not the content that crosses those cables or satellites. And look, I'm not convinced that it should. The government dabbled with that for about 40 years in the middle of the 20th century with the Fairness Doctrine experiment before eventually abolishing it when cable news cropped up. Now you could easily get more information and seek out opposing views on your own without having to rely on just a few handful of channels available back in the 1940s. So no, I'm not convinced that government should tell us what information is healthiest to consume, but we the people should learn to develop the discipline to declare our independence from the tyranny of choice. We have more options and choices today than we could ever sift through. We imagine we can choose the news we want, like food from some menu, all while social media and big tech strengthen their stranglehold on the information supply chain before it finds its way through their filters and into our feeds. These platforms, which started out promising connection and community, some have devolved into digital predators exploiting our attention for their profit. Their algorithms aren't designed to inform or enlighten, they're engineered to inflame. They certainly don't promote localism. They prey on our fears, feed our anxieties, and reward outrage because anger keeps us scrolling. The results can be devastating. Mental health is plummeting, civil discourse crumbling, children grow up tethered to these devices, distorting reality and eroding their self-worth. And privacy? That's a distant relic, auctioned off to the highest bidder by companies that claim to bring us together. Big tech's unchecked power can influence elections, silence or diminish dissenting voices, even destabilize democracies, all while hiding behind a vague community guideline and empty promises of reform. They don't see us as their customers. They see us as their product. Every like, share, and click drives up their stock price and down our sense of community and localism. I don't know what Congress will do about any of it, but I know this. Here, we don't treat you as customers or as products. We're just your neighbors. We're in this together. And until next time, we're off the record.